Breaking news, we're looking live at a community in mourning and shock after one of the worst mass shootings in American history. Here's what we know. At around 9:30 this morning, a gunman walked into Sandy Hook Elementary School in Newtown, Connecticut, and opened fire. Police say he killed 20 children, young children from 5 to 10 years old. The shootings took place in 2 rooms of one section of the school. He also killed at least 6 adults before killing himself. Police found the body of the suspect's mother at his home earlier in the day. A prayer vigil for the victims was held tonight at a church. It took place a mile away from Sandy Hook Elementary. Hundreds were in attendance. Earlier at the White House, another vigil was held with people holding candles. But this gathering was for a call for more gun control. Many say this tragedy demands tougher legislation. Inside the White House, a visibly shaken President Obama offered these words about the mass killing.
The majority of those who died today were children. Beautiful little kids between the ages of 5 and 10 years old. They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own. Among the fallen were also teachers, men and women who devoted their lives to helping our children fulfill their dreams.
Highly emotional President Obama today, reflecting how most of the nation would have been feeling. And tonight, police have identified the killer as Adam Lanza. This is his brother, Ryan Lanza, being taken into questioning today. We'll have much more on the shooter ahead, and I'll talk to his former classmate. Meanwhile, Susan Candiotti has new details on this shooter and joins me now from outside the school in Newtown. Susan, a desperate day for this school, for the families, for these poor children, for America. What do we know about the person that perpetrated this hideous crime?
You know, it is so heartbreaking, Piers. We're learning he's 20-year-old Adam Lanza. We know, according to our sources, that for whatever reason, when he came to the school this day, he was wearing what's described to me as black battle fatigues and a military vest. He came armed with 3 weapons, 2 of them handguns, one described as a Glock, another one described as a Sig Sauer, and a third one where the police found in the vehicle. Those 2 weapons were found on him in the school. The third one was found, the Bushmaster, which is a semi-automatic, and it was found in a car outside the school. Now, what led him to this? We don't know. We do know this, that police have questioned both his brother and his father. His brother was taken into custody for questioning only, as not being called a suspect, from his apartment in Hoboken, New Jersey. Now, we understand that the father was also questioned by authorities here in the Newtown, Connecticut area. The father is divorced from Nancy Lanza. Now, she is the mother of the 2, who is a school teacher and who is counted among the dead. Her body was found in a residence here in the Newtown area as well. Now, believe it or not, Piers, those weapons, according to authorities, were owned by the mother, Nancy Lanza, in this case, not by the shooter. So, still trying to piece together a motive. There are signs we are hearing from our sources that the shooter may have suffered from some kind of personality disorder. Did he leave any notes behind? Did he tell anyone what he was planning to do? Among the many questions that we all have tonight.
There certainly are. Susan Kendall, for now, thank you very much indeed. I want to turn now to Ashley Banfield. She's in Newtown, Connecticut as well. Ashley, I was watching earlier when you were speaking to Wolf Blitzer, and you became very emotional because 2 of your own children, I think, are at a school in Connecticut, and you weren't sure for a while exactly what was happening with them. Thankfully, they were okay. But this is every parent's nightmare. From what we understand, the bodies of these poor children are still lying there on what the police are calling the crime scene at this school. The parents can't even see them. It's just an unimaginable horror.
There's no other way to put it. Unimaginable horror, and it was an evil that's been visited upon this community, according to the governor of Connecticut, Dan Malloy, who spoke here earlier, Piers. I have another detail for you that I want to share with you about how some of these parents learned that they wouldn't be seeing their children again. I think you already know the detail that many of the children were rushed out of the school, out of the Sandy Hook Elementary School by the police, by teachers, and they raced on foot to a nearby police or rather a nearby fire station, which became the staging area. There were robocalls that went out. We've heard those robocalls saying, parents of the Sandy Hook Elementary students, come to this fire station to be reunited with your children. Throughout the day, there was one area within that fire station where the children were kept and they were shown movies until their parents could come and find them. There was another area where a number of the parents were milling about, waiting for students to be brought into the fire station. You can imagine it was quite a chaotic scene for some time. Slowly but surely, Piers, over the course of the day, parents arrived, children were taken away, parents continued to wait, other children didn't arrive, and ultimately there was a moment where they had to tell these waiting parents, there will be no more reunions tonight. And I'm told from someone who was inside that area, in a room adjacent, that at the moment those parents were told there would be no more reunions and no more children coming, that there were wails that were released. And the person who told me this said this was the moment she completely broke down. There was also a nurse on hand who came, volunteer, having worked 2 decades in the business. Her brother telling me that she just wanted to be there and help in any way she could as a grief counselor, and was present at that time as well. Just a horrifying moment, if you can imagine, being those parents who waited and waited and waited only to hear this. And ultimately, like you said, Piers, they know the bodies of their children are still in that school tonight.
It's just hard to imagine anything worse in the world. Ashley, thank you for now. I'm going to be joined now by Mark Bowden. He's the mayor of Danbury, which is right next to Newtown. Mr. Mayor, thank you for joining me. This is just, it's almost beyond description, beyond any understanding. How is the community dealing with this? Are they yet? What can you do?
Well, obviously, it's been a horrific day here in the greater Danbury area, and in particular the town of Newtown. Clearly, our heart goes out to all those individuals who lost loved ones today, and obviously the children and the staff and everybody else. It's been an incredibly difficult day. I have to tell you that the first selectman of Newtown, Pat Lodra, has done a tremendous job. She's been working very hard. Unfortunately, can't be with us right now, but she's really doing what needs to be done. The first responders have been tremendous. The staff at the school has been absolutely heroic in terms of their approach to this, and it's just been just an absolute international tragedy and crisis.
And I understand, Mr. Mayor, that you knew the principal of the school who also was killed.
That's correct. I had the honor of working in the same school system and very close proximity to Dawn, who passed away today. She was a teacher in the Danbury Public School System, and then elevated up through the ranks and eventually ended up a principal here in Newtown. And just a committed, hardworking, dedicated educator, somebody who cared deeply about kids, and she put kids first in every facet and every way in which she executed her job, and somebody who we just would all admire and would all want working with our children as a professional.
Well, it's an extremely sad day, and I appreciate you joining me, Mr. Mayor, and I can only wish you all the very best. We're trying to rebuild the community. Do you know if there are any plans for any more vigils tomorrow?
There are vigils scheduled throughout this community of Newtown throughout the weekend. In addition to that, Connecticut itself is having a simultaneously vigil, if you will, simultaneous vigil that they're trying to organize right now, where each town and each village and each city will take a moment out and spend time reflecting, and really maybe starting once we get through this initial horrendous shock and reflecting a little bit about our public policy positions in terms as they relate to things like gun control, things like how we deal with folks that are mentally disabled, once we fully understand this horrific tragedy that's occurred. And I think that conversation will be started over the next couple of weeks.
Mayor Mark Bowden, thank you very much indeed for joining me.
Thank you, Piers.
We can't imagine what it was like inside that school, but Sophia Lubinsky was there. She's just 8 years old, and she's a student at Sandy Hook. She joins me now, along with her mother, Brenda. Thank you both for joining me. If I may start with you, Brenda, this is every mother's nightmare. When was the first that you heard about this, and how did you hear?
You hear something?
I received a call from the school system, from the superintendent, saying that there was a shooting in Newtown, but didn't say that it was a school, but that the schools were on lockdown. So I wasn't too concerned because I didn't know where it happened. And then I received a text on my phone from a news organization, and they said that Sandy Hook School, there had been a shooting. So I got in my car and I went over to the school, and there were already state police, the fire, Newtown police.
And when you got there, obviously scenes of complete chaos. How quickly was it that you realized your daughter was safe?
Okay. When I got there, there was complete chaos, but I did see some moms and a neighbor, and I asked them what happened, and they said they didn't know, but that there was a shooting. And then I saw a neighbor, like I said, and he said they carried out a little girl, and she looked like she was dead. So instantly I panicked because of my baby here. But thankfully, no sooner he said that, I looked towards the kids who were being brought from the school to the firehouse, and I saw her class, and I ran up and I said, "Where's Sophia?" And they said, "Oh, she's okay, she's coming." And I saw her with her teacher, and then we all were taken into the firehouse, where we were kept so they can do a roll call and make sure all the students were accounted for.
And Sophia, it's obviously been a very terrifying day for you and for all your friends. What did you think was happening? Were you aware that there was somebody firing a gun in the school?
Can you hear, honey?
Not really, my earpiece.
She can't really hear you. What she told me was that they heard pops in the hallway. And the teacher told me also, Courtney Martin, she's my hero, that she locked the door immediately and brought all the kids to a corner of the room where they stayed there. They were scared, they were shaken, but they didn't know what was going on until later when they were brought into the firehouse. Police came and knocked on the door and said, "It's okay, you can come out." And they guided them through the back of the school, and they walked over to the firehouse. And that's where I caught up with Sophia.
And Brenda, how is Sophia now? It must have been an extraordinarily traumatic experience for all those children who survived this.
I think that she's numb right now. She's a pretty bright kid, and she has a big support staff at home, and we love her very much, and she'll be fine. It's just that we're devastated for the rest of the family because we don't know who was hurt. I do know my close friends, their children are okay, but we don't know who the children were.
I don't know if she can hear me or not, Brendan, but I just wondered whether Sophia wanted to say anything about what happened to her today.
Do you want to say anything, honey? No?
No, okay.
Are you sure?
No.
I think she's too cold now.
No, I think she should probably go home with her mum. It's been a terrifying day for everybody involved, and I'm just so grateful that you were able to see your daughter. Obviously, your heart must go out to those poor families who've not been able to see their poor children again.
It's a small community, it's a close-knit school, and it's devastating, and I'll be here for anybody, and our prayers go out to all the families.
Well, Brenda, thank you very much indeed.
I'm just the luckiest lady right now. Thank you.
Brenda, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I do appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Very lucky indeed. The gunman has been identified as Adam Lanza, and joining me now from London is Lanza's former classmate, Alex Israel. Alex Israel, thank you for joining me. You knew this character. Is this something that you could have ever predicted, that he would one day flip and do something as monstrous as this?
I mean, I don't know if you can ever predict something like that would happen. You really never think that it's going to happen to your school, somewhere where you live and you've lived your whole life. But I don't know if I could have predicted it. I mean, there was something off about him. I really only knew him closely when we were very, very young, when we were in elementary school together. And I mean, he was always a little bit different. He mostly stuck to himself, but I don't know if you can say that you could have predicted this.
He was, by all accounts, a pretty clever young man, particularly in maths, almost a sort of genius, apparently, at that. Tell me about that side of him.
I mean, I was never in any of his classes or anything like that, but yeah, you could definitely tell that he was, I would say, a genius. Yeah, there was definitely something there that was a little bit above the rest of us.
Did he have friends? Was he sociable?
I always saw him alone when he was walking through the school or when he was sitting at the table, sitting on the bus. But I mean, I'm sure I think he had a few maybe close friends, maybe through school, through his classes. But most of the time that I saw him, he was alone, yeah.
How would you describe his personality?
He was really quiet. He kept to himself. I mean, he was a little fidgety, a little uneasy sometimes if you were just to look at him. I think he was just socially not really into going out there and making as many friends as everyone was really doing in elementary school and middle school. He preferred to stay to himself.
Did you know his family, his mother in particular?
I mean, I knew her, we lived in the neighborhood, so I knew her through neighborhood events. My mom knew her. I mean, she was a very nice woman, a kindergarten teacher, obviously, so I didn't know her personally, but from what I remember, she was a nice woman.
His parents got divorced. Were you aware of that having any big impact on him?
You know, I don't know when they got divorced. I've known him since I would say first grade. And he's always been the way that I've described him as. He's always been reserved, quiet. So I don't know if the divorce had anything to do with that. I don't know when they divorced, but that could have caused that, or it could have made it worse as he got older and became a little bit more reserved. But I'm not sure if that affected it.
Where were you when you heard about what had happened, and what was your immediate reaction when you discovered that it was this person that you knew?
It was devastating. I mean, even to first, I'm in London now studying here for the semester. I'm coming home on Thursday to this, but I found out first, you know, early this morning, I guess, probably when it broke at home, but at this time it was like around 2. And just the first information of it, it's just devastating to think that something like that could happen in a town where you've grown up in. I've felt safe my whole life. I was raised in that elementary school, raised in the school system there, and finding out that it was someone I knew ultimately who had done all of this is just upsetting. I mean, you can't imagine that would ever happen.
And the community around Newtown, how would you describe that? I'm hearing it was a very kind of, it's a quiet place. Stuff like this just never happens. And obviously this is an extreme, but
yeah.
They don't really get many shootings, gun murders. This is a very exceptional kind of place in that sense.
No, I mean, it's a pretty big town. I mean, space-wise, we span over a pretty vast array of land, but it's really close-knit in that everyone knows each other, everyone is close with each other. The school systems are so close. You grow up with these people and you go to school with them, and everyone really came together, I think, through this, and is really supporting each other really quite well, and that's one good thing to come out of it, if anything at all.
When was the last time you spoke to Adam Lanza?
Probably middle school. I didn't have any connection with him in high school, but middle school probably, I would say, the last time I actually said a word to him.
Your summary would be a kind of fidgety, slightly a loner, not massively sociable, but not apparently dangerous.
No, I mean, I never noticed anything scary or violent or anything like that. I would never have expected that from him, I don't think. Just for someone who sort of went under the radar and kept to themselves, you wouldn't really think of them as doing something crazy like this.
Well, Alex, it must have been a hell of a shock for you, and I'm very grateful to you for joining me this evening, giving us some perspective on the character of this person. I appreciate you joining me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming next, the psychology of the shooter, Adam Lanza. 2 experts join me to talk about the gunman.
Earlier today, a number of our citizens, beautiful children, had their life taken away from them, as well as adults whose responsibility it was to educate and supervise those children. The perpetrator of the crime is dead, as is an individual who the perpetrator lived with.
The Connecticut governor, talking about this tragedy, we have new information on the gunman, Adam Lanza. He was wearing black battle fatigues and a bulletproof vest when he opened fire at the school. What could have driven him to do this? With me now is Dr. Javier Amador, a profiler and psychologist. He's consulted on many mass shootings. Also with me is Dr. Frank Ochberg. He's a former FBI psychiatrist. Welcome to you both. Let me start with you, Dr. Amador, if I may. You've been involved in many of these kind of incidents, possibly nothing as appalling as this. There seems to be a pattern at the moment. We saw this with Aurora, with the shopping mall shooting last week. Young men in their early 20s suddenly flipping, getting hold of weapons and causing outrages. What is driving them? What is the possible background to what is going on here?
Well, working on a lot of these cases, there are a number of different causes that kind of can be divided into two broad categories. And one category are people who really have that trait of a loss of empathy and inability to connect to other people, and a history of cruelty, what people talk about as sociopaths or antisocial personality. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have people with brain disorders, with serious mental illnesses that are either untreated, that are, because of what's happening in their life, exacerbated by stress. So it sounds like the little bit that's coming out already that we're leaning more towards the direction of this is someone with a brain disorder. And there are some other parts of the story, of course, that it may take years to really uncover what triggered this. But there's nothing sudden about any of these stories in my experience. That's the headline for me. It's sudden for us that this happened. But as you begin to understand his story, I assure you, the warning signs were there. And not that they were ignored, but they weren't recognized.
Are people like this as likely to carry out what they end up doing, these atrocities, if they didn't have easy access to firearms?
Well, look, there's no question that firearms play a role. But I can tell you from experience, if somebody wants to kill a number of people, there are other weapons of destruction. There's ways to make bombs, in at least one case I've worked on. So firearms is certainly an important part of the picture, but understanding when somebody has a mental illness, if mental illness has played a role here, and I'm not saying it, I know that it has, that certainly is something that needs to be very carefully considered before allowing that person to have a firearm.
Frank Ockberg, you specialise in treating post-traumatic stress and the effects of violence. Obviously a very particular problem here with so many young people at this school who've luckily survived, but having to deal now with the horror of losing possible friends, people that they knew from the school, teachers, the head teacher and so on. Where do you start with trying to counsel young children when this kind of appalling thing happens?
I think the first thing is helping the parents. The children look to their parents, and for the parents, some of them are stunned. They're grieving. They've lost a precious 6-year-old. For the children themselves, sometimes children who go through this and who do survive take a while to make sense out of it. They may regress. They may move backward a year or two in terms of their normal development. Some of them will figure out years later what actually happened. And some are going to do relatively well. They'll be sadder, they'll be wiser in a way. The most important thing is what I see happening right now. That community is coming together. People are loving each other. The president has come to remind us that we are a nation who cares, and he came as a father. So I am a father and a grandfather. I have called my children, and I want to know how they're doing with their children. So as we come together, we do the best that we can at a sad time like this.
Dr. Amador, I suppose the big question is why would this shooter do what he did, go to a classroom and murder so many young children of such a young, tender age, possibly the classroom that his mother taught in? He's already, we know, probably killed his mother at their home. Can you try and piece together from your experience the thought process here, why he would then, having killed his mother, go to the school and do what he did?
Well, I don't have a crystal ball, and I haven't diagnosed him or assessed him. And I'm not saying that people with mental illness are more violent. Let me be crystal clear about that, because that's not the case. It's just simply not the data that we have. But if indeed mental illness is a part of this, then there's a particular path that needs to be looked at. Is this somebody who became depressed and suicidally depressed? And with his autism, you know, his roommate, Alex Israel, mentioned that he preferred to stay alone. Well, actually, a symptom of Asperger's, and this is one report coming out, which may or may not be true, is something's missing in the brain, the capacity for empathy, for social connection, which leaves the person suffering from this condition prone to serious depression and anxiety. And so they're fidgety, they're anxious, they're depressed, and if they're suicidally depressed, you know, we just don't know enough, Piers. I guess what I'm trying to do and agreeing to come here and talk about this is to ask people to don't rush to judgment about who this young man is. We don't have enough information. If it was mental illness that played a role, you know, it's an opportunity for us to do better.
You see, I mean, there is a school of thought. You shouldn't give him any attention, the shooter, and shouldn't name him and so on, because this brings attention to him. My view is he's dead, so he won't be able to bask in the appalling glory of what he did. But secondly, there is a pattern now of these young men...
You're making the assumption
that
he wants to bask in the glory of what he did. We don't know that. I've met shooters. I've spent many hours with men like this who have killed dozens of people. And they don't necessarily want glory. They're seriously ill. And I've met others who do want glory. So again, you're rushing to a particular interpretation of this. It's way too soon for us to know. There are two general paths.
Yeah, sorry, Frank.
Piers, I'd like to endorse that also. I know that for the whole country now, we really want to know why this happened. And when you are a parent, you can't stop thinking about these questions that you're asking. But we have to be very careful in answering them. When you mentioned that we've had several similar cases recently, yes, these were similar in that guns were used, they were spree killings, they were mass killings. But I can tell you, as a medical doctor and a psychiatrist who's worked closely with the FBI on cases, there are dramatically different motives and mentalities. There are people who don't have a conscience. They torture animals. They have no basis in their mind for empathy or sympathy. They learn how to fake it. And I believe that one of the Columbine killers fit that pattern, but the other was completely different. He was not a psychopath. And in the case of the Aurora shooter, the jury isn't in yet, but I have a feeling we're going to find that he was on the verge of major mental illness with delusions, hallucinations. One time in my life, I was responsible for the federal program of mental health services in America. And I have to admit, we failed. We failed America in protecting the lives of the seriously mentally ill. Most of what they do is suffer in silence. Their families want to do better by them. And as a country, we have not stepped up and been sympathetic and caring and appropriate for the seriously mentally ill.
I think that's an extremely important point. I mean, what I would just say to you, Dr. Amidal, I think you've both made extremely valid points. My point really is you've got three successive appalling mass shootings here involving young men in their 20s, where the background to all of them from people that knew them was not dissimilar. You know, they seemed to be fairly normal, kind of, it may be slightly odd, but nothing that would ring any alarm bells. And I suppose the point, I think, of examining their character and personality is that there must be a good likelihood of there being others like them out there who may be considering similar atrocities. How do people that know these types of people spot any warning signs?
Piers, I have three children.
We're not talking.
Let me start with Dr. Amidal.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have three small children, and before this interview, they asked me what I was doing, and we talked about this for about an hour and a half. And my 9-year-old got very frightened. He goes to an elementary school. And I explained to him that these things are exceedingly rare. And let's not forget, this is exceedingly rare. Okay? I mean, just because something happened in the last month doesn't statistically make it a common occurrence. So let's really be clear and tell our children that. The other thing is, this is an opportunity to turn tragedy into an opportunity to fix some of the things that are terribly broken in our mental health care system. We actually do know what to do, Piers. We do know how to identify people at risk for violence. And it's all at the level of state funding. Sorry to get into the specifics, but funding of state mental health care and screening of not only young adults and children, and offering a good assessment, we can, in fact, do a much better job of not only caring for these people, but identifying those who would never be violent if not for a mental illness. So that is one big part of the story. There's another part which is the one I think that most people are more familiar with and interested in because of movies, frankly. You know, the diabolical, antisocial sociopath. Both stories are true, but you know, both are actually quite rare.
Okay, the final word to you, Frank. I'll make it brief if you may.
America has more gun deaths than any other advanced nation in the world, and we have laws that say if you are seriously mentally ill, you shouldn't possess a weapon, but we don't enforce those laws. We have to get together across this divide. We need the NRA to step up and say that they believe in gun safety, not just in gun ownership. We need politicians on both sides of the aisle to tackle this problem, or we're going to have more dead American children.
Frank Ockberg and Dr. Javier Amador, thank you both very much. Still ahead, we'll talk to survivors of another mass school shooting. But next, the push for more gun control after today's tragedy. We'll debate it.
These neighborhoods are our neighborhoods, and these children are our children. And we're going to have to come together and take meaningful action to prevent more tragedies like this, regardless of the politics.
President Obama today on the shooting. The massacre is raising new questions about the access of guns in America. We've been known as New York Congressman Gerald Nadler, who's urgently calling for more gun control. Also John Lott, a former chief economist of the United States Sentencing Commission and author of More Guns, Less Crime. Dan Gross, who's president of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence. And Steve Dulan, who's the attorney for the Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners. Let me start with you, if I may, Congressman. You were pretty outspoken today saying this is time now to bring in new gun control laws.
Yes, I mean, if this doesn't wake us up, I don't know what will. And I was heartened that the president said that we had to take meaningful action, and the only meaningful action he can take is to lead a crusade, and to use the bully pulpit and lead a crusade for reasonable gun control legislation in Congress. You know, these massacres are taking place more and more often. We saw, by the way, today a very similar incident in China, where a madman attacked an elementary school in China with a knife. We had 22 injured children. Injured, not dead. And that's the difference. In the United States, you know, we have 9,000 people killed with guns last year. In similar countries like Germany, 170, Canada, 150. There's a reason for that. Because
what would you like to see in terms of specific gun control? Well,
there are a number of pieces of legislation that we've been pushing for years. No reasonable gun owner who's a sportsman can object to bans on assault weapons made only to kill as many human beings as possible in a military situation. Nobody can reasonably object to a ban on sale of large ammunition clips so you can't reload. Nobody can reasonably object to micro-stamping of cartridges so you can trace the murder weapon. No one can reasonably object to eliminating the gun show exception, so that even if you buy a gun at a gun show, they still have to check your background to make sure they're not selling a gun to someone on the terrorist watch list, or to a mentally unstable person, or to a felon. Those are the reasonable things we should do.
Let me turn to you, John Lott. We've had a heated debate before about this after a previous incident. Two things happened in 1996. There was a massacre in Tasmania in which 35 people were killed. And the Australians, led by the Prime Minister John Howard, who was right-wing, friend of George W. Bush, he brought in pretty draconian new laws after that. He banned semi-automatic and automatic rifles and shotguns. As a result, over the next decade, firearm homicide rate fell by 59%. The firearm suicide rate fell by 65%.
That's not true.
That is true.
No, it's not.
No, it is true.
If you look over time...
We say it's not true. It is true.
I'm telling you, people can go and look up the Australian national statistics themselves. And what you find is that for decades, the murder rate was falling in Australia. It basically stopped falling. If you just compare the average over 2 decades where it's falling to what it was afterwards, it makes it look like the average before is higher than the average afterwards. But if you look on a year-by-year basis, there wasn't that fall.
Why does Adam Lanza's mother, who sadly was killed by him today, why did she need to have these 3 weapons in her home?
Can I just follow up one thing on the Australian
No,
thing?
I want you to answer this. Why did she need to have these 3 weapons legally purchased, including this semi-automatic Bushmaster? Why would a woman teacher at a kindergarten need these weapons in her home, and allowing, therefore, a clearly deranged son to take them and commit this atrocity?
You know, whatever that gun looks like, it's a semi-automatic rifle. Any hunting rifle, just about, is a semi-automatic rifle. Just because it looks different on the outside doesn't mean it functions differently.
But he fired off over 100 rounds in several minutes.
Look,
with this apparently harmless assault rifle.
Nobody said guns were harmless. Guns make it easier.
You just try to make up. It's just an average old gun.
Look,
he fired
to me
over
why
100 rounds, and he killed 20 children.
Right.
20 children between 5
and
10. At what point do you gun lobby guys say, we get it, it's time for change?
Right, it is time. We have... Look where
time to do what?
Is to get rid of some of these gun laws
Which
that
one?
cause the gun-free zones.
Laws?
Look what's happened. All these attacks this year have occurred where guns are banned. Okay? Well, look at the Aurora movie theater shooting. There were 7 movies...
What the hell has that got to do with it?
The point.
Seriously, what has that got to do with it?
Well, you never let me explain.
You think he
can I say
it
something?
was a gun-free zone?
Look at the Aurora movie theater one, for example. There were 7 movie theaters showing the Batman movie within a 20-minute drive of where the killer lived. Only one of those banned guns. He didn't go to the movie theater closest to his home. He didn't go to the movie theater with the largest screen. He went to the one movie theater that banned guns. Now, if you look at bans generally, you can't point to a place, you know, Chicago, D.C., where we banned guns. Murder rates, violent crimes went up afterwards. In the UK, in Jamaica, Ireland, island nations that have banned guns, you can't find a place where murder rates have actually gone down. They've gone up, usually by large amounts.
You cannot find a place...
Okay. Let me bring it down here.
First of all, I mean, basically every statistic that John Lott just cited is pure bunk in terms of the fact that more guns equals that's true. They were gun-free zones, but attributing that to the fact that this violence occurred, that's where I have to step in because listen, my brother was shot in a shooting on top of the Empire State Building, which was incredibly chaotic. I know firsthand. I've talked with the victims from the Aurora tragedy and all these tragedies. To a person, they all say if there were another person there that were armed, it would have undoubtedly led to more carnage. There's going to be a guest. Excuse me. I let you talk. Let me finish. Let me finish. In every one of these cases, they say if there were more guns, it would have only led to more chaos. Look at the recent Empire State Building shooting here in New York, where there were highly trained law enforcement officers in the chaos. There were 8 other people shot, and every one of them was an innocent civilian, and every one of them was shot by one of these law enforcement officers.
Let me bring in Steve Dillon here. He's the attorney for the Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners. You believe, Mr. Dillon, I believe that there should be more guns in schools. Is that right?
Well, I believe that those of us who are licensed to carry are responsible people shouldn't be prohibited from carrying in schools or other places. In fact, the Michigan legislature just passed a bill last night and sent to the governor for signature, a bill that would allow those of us who are licensed to take 1 more day of training, including range time, and then actually be able to carry in the places where we couldn't carry before.
Why on earth would you want more guns in schools after what's happened today?
Here's why, Piers. If we could suddenly make all guns disappear, I'd have a different position. But I spend a lot of time thinking about this and reading about it. I teach a class at the law school level called Gun Control Seminar, and I get a new group of law students every term, and we discuss this in detail. And the simple facts are guns exist. They are essentially 1800s technology. Even semi-automatics came into being in the late 1800s. They're easy to make. They're not going anywhere. They last several human lifetimes with minimal maintenance. So since guns exist, and we know for a fact that the only way to stop an evil person, like the person you were discussing earlier in the show, is to shoot him, or he's going to shoot himself.
Hang on. This is exactly the argument that I've been hearing ever since I've joined CNN. I joined on air about a week after Gabby Giffords, a congresswoman, was shot in the head Right, ever since then, we've had the Sikh temple, the Aurora incident, we had the shopping mall last week, guy downstairs shot in the head from our New York bureau, and so on and so on and so on. And the argument I keep hearing is, well, if everybody else was armed, it wouldn't happen. It's a load of total hogwash, isn't it? No. If everyone had been armed at that movie theatre, twice as many people would have been killed in the mayhem that erupted.
Give an example where people have stopped these attacks and a bystander's been hit. You can't give me one example where a bystander's been hit by a permit holder.
The Empire State Building.
Where a permit holder.
Can I just...
The proof of the pudding
you don't
is that in
see
every other
mass
industrialized country in the world,
gun shows
other than the United States,
ranges.
they have reasonable gun control laws, and they have 100 people a year, not 9,000 or 10,000 a year killed by guns.
Guys, listen,
Japan...
but it was lower before gun control there.
Japan adopted strong gun control
and
laws.
has almost zero crime.
And their homicide rate plummeted.
But the point is, the gun control didn't change it.
In Scotland, in Dunblane, in 1996, there was a very similar school shooting.
Right.
Just an awful situation. 16 young children killed exactly as they were today.
You know what,
here.
the two of the
and they, as a result of this, they brought in a handgun ban. 162,000 handguns were handed in. Right? It is time for an amnesty.
Murder rates went up.
Listen. There's an amnesty in Australia
Murder
as well.
rates went up.
There are about 35 murders a year in Britain.
But it was lower for another reason.
There are nearly 12,000 murders a year from guns in this country.
The point is,
when are you guys going to focus on that? And stop telling me the answer is more guns. No, it is not the answer.
Look, listen.
Let's
focus
on it. After the ban, it was higher than it was before the ban.
So you want more guns, not less?
I'm saying
300 million guns in America isn't enough for you.
When you ban guns...
How many more kids have to die before you guys say, we want less guns, not more?
I'm upset about this. He asked me a question.
I want to tell you something.
Let him answer the question.
I'm upset because I worry that the gun control laws that you're pushing have killed people.
Oh, what a lot of nonsense.
Look, you have to explain.
Nonsense. An average of 35 killings from guns in Britain a year. In a place that banned handguns.
But
here,
it was lower
no ban on these guns.
12,000
people a year die from gun murders.
Look, there are lots of differences across country. You have to understand.
Can I please have the opportunity to say something without screaming? I mean,
there is. I'm sorry, but
I want the. I just need to.
I've been debating this all week. Following the Bob Costas thing, the shopping mall and so on, following Aurora. I've been debating it for months, if not 2 years. I'm so frustrated. I'm so furious that these kids have been blown away again with legally acquired weapons. Some boy who's got problems takes his mother's 3 weapons, including this ridiculous assault rifle, and goes into school and kills his kids. And you guys on the gun lobby still want to tell me the answer is more guns.
Look,
it is madness.
No, but where...
Yes, sir.
How else can you stop someone who's shooting people?
If you could let the congressman speak.
What you ought to be most angry about is that every poll shows that by massive majorities, Americans agree with what you just said. Right. And yet we have a lobby, the leadership of the NRA, who function as enablers of mass murderers. And that's what they are. They're enablers of mass murder because they terrify the class of political people. And even though polling shows that most NRA members would support reasonable gun controls, but every time someone proposes it, they come in, they lie, they say they'll take your guns away, and they stop any kind of legislation to prevent
nobody outside of the military and the police force in this country needs one of these in their lives.
We need
enabling
to say something without screaming. Listen, the encouraging thing, and what you should hopefully take inspiration, because we're all frustrated, we're all outraged, is this conversation and what these guys are saying does not represent what the American public wants. It does not represent the conversation that the American public wants to have. We're all in favor of things like criminal background checks. 74% of NRA members are. 40% of all gun sales don't require a background check. That's something that we all agree on. And there are things that we can do.
And it's not, as they try and tell me, an anti-American thing. To say, I respect the Second Amendment, I respect the right of every family to defend themselves. I don't respect the right of families to load their homes with these so that a disturbed kid can take them and blow up a school.
This debate is not as polarized as this gentleman
we are ending the debate for now, but this will continue next week. I can guarantee it. I'm going to
all these attacks
come back next week when you've had time to think about this, because you have to change your thinking. The gun lobby has to change its thinking.
Why do all these attacks